Walla Valley. I'm here with our old friend, Doug Fletcher. Really, I'm not going to say old friend because you're a young friend. You look terrific.
Oh, no, yeah, no. We're both getting there.
Well, it's only the white thing, you know? That's all it is.
Yeah, I don't feel like, I look at myself in the mirror and go, is that really...
Yeah.
Is that me? But because I don't feel that way. But
it's weird.
Yeah.
I can completely relate to your saying, but it's not. I think getting older is a cool thing, with the exception of the aches and pains that come with it. But
well, yeah. There's a wonderful old French song about this guy that was running a business of ill repute, and. According to the song, all these women were standing in line to pay their money, and the sign said, "Learn a fascinating new game." And so when this old lady came in, she said, "I really want to play your game." And he looked her up and down and says, "I'm sorry, but you're too old for this game." And she said, "Fine." And as she turned to leave, she said, "Have it your way, young man, but there's no substitute for experience."
That's well said, actually.
I think that's true in the wine industry a lot, actually, that, as you get older, you have more perspective, and you're not so uptight about having something perfect. You really you're working on trying to make things taste as good as they can, and you just work at it. In fact, it's hard for me to get people to play this game, but because everybody wants to play the Parker game. Everybody wants to know what's the best, because that's kind of how Americans think. Is there's the worst, and there's the best, and there's everybody in between. But wine isn't that. It's the game should be, instead of what's the best, it's what are you going to do with it. Are you going to serve it with, are you going to have it with food? You're going to drink it as a cocktail? You're going to have it with dessert? And all those things are different, and they're different things. And so high alcohol wines tend to, that have been the rage for a long time, they're not really food wines. They're cocktail wines. And they're, that's how come a little bit of, sugar in red wine is the rage, is because they're not having it with dinner, they're having it as a cocktail. Yeah. And so if you're having wine with dinner, it's like, okay, then what wine? And what are you having? And so if you're going to have crab, for example, big, rich, leesy Chardonnay doesn't work. It's crisp, unoaked Chardonnay, for example.
Yeah.
And so, but if you do a blind tasting of those, the crisp, unoaked Chardonnay isn't going to be the one that's preferred. It's going to be the one that's big and oaky. Yeah. Well, okay, but so what did that tell you? I don't know.
Here in Washington, I'm curious. To me, this is a very fresh and youthful area, even though there's plenty of experience here. What do you see for an area like this in terms of growth, or just simply getting well known beyond this area?
Well, Linda Reef, the executive director for the Napa Valley wineries, has done an incredible job of getting people who buy or drink wine to think of Napa Valley as the best. And nobody thinks of Washington as that. And when we bought, when the Terlatos bought Klipsun, the vineyard was one of the oldest in Red Mountain, and Patricia Gallus, the owner, was incredibly good at promoting the vineyard as high quality fruit, even though she didn't make any herself. She only sold fruit to the wineries that she thought would help promote her brand, which was really smart. And in fact, there was times where somebody made wine from her vineyards and she didn't like it. She called them up and said, "What did you do to my grapes? I'm not selling anything anymore." So so wineries had the fear of God in them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and they promoted her brand, and essentially that's what the Troladas bought. Because by the time they were interested in selling it, it was, reaching the end of its productive life, and there, a lot of vineyards up here in Washington all have leaf roll virus because of the back when they were planted in the 80s, people weren't paying attention to that so much, and they planted stuff on their own roots up here because they could, and they used that as a marketing ploy to say, our vines are on their own roots, as if that's something important. When in fact, really, it was just they were too cheap to buy rootstock. But I mean, and so now the chickens have come home to roost, and especially here in Walla Walla area, there's phylloxera around, and so people are now having to do what the rest of the world did 150 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's been a learning process for a lot of people up here. And I think, if you ask marketing people, at least with the Troladas, if I go to the marketing people and say, "Explain to me who buys a $300 bottle of wine and why do they buy it?"
Yeah.
They're not very good at answering that question. And up here, it's really that case in spades. Nobody, I mean, if you're a farmer, you don't have any you don't have any kind of understanding of what, why somebody buys a Gucci bag or, or a Ferrari or, the status behind that. And they haven't worked very hard up here of creating that status for wine. There's some people now trying. I think Cayuse is a really good example. And a couple others have been really trying to make their brand exclusive and sought after.
I want to take a moment to actually introduce you because I didn't do that. But again, many of our longtime listeners will know Doug Fletcher because we've known Doug for 600, 700,000 years, something like that.
A millennium at least.
Yeah, at the very least. And Doug used to be with Terlato a long time ago. We first met at Rutherford Hill, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, we are talking today about Klipsun wine and Klipsun Vineyard, which is something we talked about probably about 2 years ago. We got
something like that, yeah.
And doesn't matter because it's just fun to sit and talk with you because of your experience and your candor, which I really appreciate. I marvel at this town. Certainly very friendly, very welcoming. You literally cannot throw a stone, politically polite, sir, without hitting a winery or a tasting room, which is really amazing. I mean, they're like one after another after another.
Oh yeah, it's become a destination place for a lot of, wine collectors. People are discovering Eastern Washington. A lot of people think it's desert here, but most people think of desert as hot and dry, but it just has to be dry. It doesn't have to necessarily be hot, and Eastern Washington is in the rain shadow of the Cascades, so the Olympic Peninsula and on the other side of the Cascades gets 100 inches of rain or some ridiculous amount, and Seattle gets 50, I think, and here we got 4. So it's just dry, but Klipsun's at the confluence of the Snake, or the Yakima and the Columbia River, and so got lots of water. But the soils are been laid down from the after the Missoula floods in the last ice age, and I didn't know much about that till I came up here. But it was a big deal. The ice during the last ice age, most of the Midwest was covered with ice, and as the climate slowly warmed that time around, and the glacier started to recede, there was, half of the Midwest was underwater, and when those big ice dams would break, it drained out, and it drained down through what's now the Columbia Gorge, and that's why it's so much of a gorge. Is just because it wasn't all that long ago in terms of geology that it just gushed water all the way down to the Pacific Ocean, and it's laid down a lot of sediment on the east side of the Cascades. And so, eastern Washington is sandy loam, but it's nutritionally rich because of the glaciers. And so we have lots of nutrient in the soil. There's not a lot of water in the soil itself. So, which is, I can't think of too many other places in the world where that really happens. I mean, maybe on the rain shadow side of the Andes, but the soils are different there. Yeah. And so here, 4 inches of rain, grapevines need maybe 24 inches, 2 feet of water, maybe something like that to grow. And so there's not enough in the soil. And so you have to irrigate them. And what's amazing about that is because the soil doesn't hold much, you have to do it on a regular basis, and you can totally control how the grapevine grows. And so
how regular is regular?
We're working that out right now at Klipsun because we've, as I said, earlier, that most of Washington was on its own roots until recently, and so most all the new plantings are now on American rootstock, and the American rootstocks that we need to use up here have to be resistant to not only phylloxera but to root knot nematodes, which is the problem in sandy soils. And there's not a lot of research done on what are the right rootstocks for that. Davis did quite a little bit of work for rootstocks in the Central Valley, but they weren't interested in high quality Cabernet. They're just interested in yield. So those rootstocks like Harmony and Freedom are very vigorous, and so they're not what you want for high-end Cabernet. So we've been at Klipsun, we've been working on trying rootstocks that we think will work well for quality, but they're also resistant to root knot. And so we're kind of the leaders in that front, actually. And so I'm working out how to irrigate those rootstocks so that we get the most out of them. So a couple of them are reasonably deep rooted, and so that means we can water them maybe just once a week. But a lot of them are shallow rooted, so that means 3 times a week, but not any more water than the ones that we did deep rooted. And that's taken us a while, trial and error, to see how we want to irrigate them. And we use several methods to measure the plant stress to determine how to irrigate those vines. So we're working on applying what we know about vine physiology to get to what we want in terms of wine quality. And so that's been exciting. Here in eastern Washington, because of that, what we just described, the winemaker or the viticulturist is in total control. You can, if the vines have grown too much or they haven't grown enough, it's your fault because you didn't water it right. The Europeans have made a big to-do about not irrigating and stuff. Well, they don't have to irrigate because God irrigates for them. It rains all summer there in most places. What I like to say is, well, okay, yeah, God irrigated for you, but God isn't necessarily interested in fine wine, and I am. So that ruffles some feathers usually. But,
I'm sure.
But they're using that as a marketing tool, and the pure and natural crowd wants to say that being pure and natural makes the best wine, and that's not true. Any more true than you go to 3-star restaurants, you go to French Laundry in Napa because of the expertise of the chef and the staff at the French Laundry, not because it's pure natural. And we need to get over that in the wine industry. It's my job as an artist, winemaker, to make something that you like to drink. And nature isn't necessarily in tune to that. I mean, I like to say that, nature's end product for grapes is vinegar, not wine.
Yeah, no.
And so we need to be the interventionist. And I think the more adept you are at that, the better it's going to come out.
I always love talking to you, Doug, because I learn something new every time. Is there an actual tasting room for Klipsun?
No, we haven't built a winery up here yet. They bought the vineyard in 2017, and we're slowly redeveloping the vineyard. And I think at some point, we're still selling grapes. We just make a small amount ourselves. Sure. And at some point, as our own line grows, we'll eventually have to. They're kind of denial about building a winery, but at some point it'll make a lot of business sense to do. I mean, if you look at Opus, for example, or Dominus in California, they custom crushed for a long time before they had enough, were making enough wine to really make it a business sense, and that's where we're at. We haven't gotten there quite yet.
Yeah, I get that. And for our listeners who'd like to learn about Klipsun online, what is your website?
Klipsun.com. So Klipsun. So Klipsun is a Native American Pidgin English word that when the British East India, I don't know, it wasn't the East India Company, the British fur trading company, I forget what it's called, started trading with Native Americans in the area for furs. The British weren't going to learn any Native American languages, and that hasn't changed since then. So the Native Americans had to learn enough English to be able to trade, and so I think it's the Chinook tribe here in the Northwest. There's a whole dictionary of Pidgin English, and Klipsun is Pidgin English for a clipped sun. So setting sun. Yeah. So as the sun sets below the horizon, you just see half of it, and so it's clipped, and so it's Klipsun.
Good name. I like it. Always good seeing you, Doug. Appreciate you making the time while I was up here, and really glad I came.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy these interviews. I ramble off on all the time, and I enjoy talking. So I enjoy talking about what we're doing up here. So thank you for interviewing me.